Well, hello there. Okay, so this time I'm going to talk about a book. It's a best-selling book for 2021. My first clue was the fact that I picked it up at Walmart, which sort of tends to the bestseller lists, things like Kristen Hanna, Stephen King, John Grisham. Anyway, I got a great deal from Walmart down the road that was shutting down. I got a twofer. Basically, I picked up The Other Black Girl, which our Discord book club is reading this month, as well as Matt Haig's latest book, The Midnight Library. In the book, we're introduced to 35-year-old Nora Seed, 27 hours before she decided to die. As the book helpfully intones, the subsequent chapters count down the hours. 9.5 hours before she decides to die, Nora loses her job. In these subsequent hours, she reflects on the fiancé that she left at the altar, refusing to sign a record deal that subsequently estranged her from her brother, the Olympic swim dreams sidestepped, her best friend halfway across the world, and then to top it all off, her cat dies. I mean, reflecting on past regrets, I understand, but feline death is like really sticking the knife in. And so, no spoiler, Nora dies. And then she finds herself in a massive library filled with infinite number of books. The hour is midnight, and of course this library is tended to by her grade school librarian, Mrs. Elm. Mrs. Elm is there to help her along. She explains that every single book represents a life where Nora made a different choice. What if she pursued her Olympic dreams, or stayed on and became the lead singer of her brother's rock band, or decided to get married, and most importantly, saved the life of her cat. And for the next 200 pages, we explore what if we're basically in the nexus of the multiverse, the nightmare scenario of the TVA, hereby called the Midnight Library. We're in the self-help corner of the Marvel Universe. Nora lives out her life as a small-town schoolteacher until she's eventually purged as a variant by Hunter B-32. Well, okay, not quite. Nora essentially wakes into her new alternate life at exactly midnight GMT because the multiverse is actually pretty particular about time zones. And full-on Quantum Leap style has to quickly get herself up to speed, figure out exactly who she is in this particular life, why she's standing outside in the cold, who's this man sleeping next to her, and what exactly is she going to sing to thousands of screaming fans in Brazil. Helpfully, she usually wakes up or comes to in this life with a phone nearby. She can Wikipedia herself in her more famous iterations or quickly scroll through texts and photographs to try and piece together who she is. And I think that's half the fun of this particular book, is going on that sense of discovery and trying to understand who she is in this life and the decisions she made to get to that point. And because we're exploring an infinite number of possibilities, a lot of the lives she ends up in, she is wildly successful, hugely influential, and incredibly famous. But it turns out Nora isn't exactly happy in those lives either. It would be so easy to slag on this awfully earnest, best-selling book that comes to the earth-shattering revelation that fame and fortune isn't exactly the path to fulfillment, that selling out shows in Sao Paulo, having your own TED Talk, or even realizing the dream of opening your own pub doesn't exactly guarantee happiness. And we've heard all of this before. I mean, this is essentially a Rupikar Instagram poem in long form. It's the bookish equivalent of a pithy quote positioned over a beachy sunset or a natural vista. It is a 300-page live, love, laugh poster. It is what an infinite number of healing crystals set in an infinite number of typewriters would eventually write. I mean, I could say that, but that would be awfully mean. And author Matt Haig is an anxious enough fellow already without having to consider my snarky take on his particular book. Maybe I'm just mad that the cat had to die. Regardless, Matt Haig has made a career about writing about self-care and wrestling with anxiety and depression. Midnight Library is essentially the novelization of the book he released a year earlier called Notes from a Nervous Planet, which is the follow-up to his memoir called Reasons to Stay Alive. Sort of sensing a theme here? Anyway, this clearly resonates with a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that could certainly benefit from a book like this, and that list keeps growing every day when you consider multiple recessions, the Trump presidency, COVID-19, the climate crisis. We all have reasons to be anxious. And my bookish hot takes aside, I really enjoyed this book and I blazed through it in a weekend. I guess I was won over by the full-on earnestness of this particular book. There is no ironic remove here. As Haig himself puts it, cynicism is a luxury for the non-suicidal. Living in the world is hard. Now, I haven't read Reasons to Stay Alive, but I did pick up Notes on a Nervous Planet. And it really is a mess of a book. This is how Haig himself describes it. It's just a bunch of short chapters, each a page or two in length, musing about places he's had panic attacks, people on social media talking about social media, getting over our anxiety around aging, stigmas around mental health, how algorithms eat empathy, and how we all need to put our phones aside for just a little while. Nearing the end of Notes on a Nervous Planet, Haig recounts rewatching one of his most favorite movies of all time, It's a Wonderful Life, and marveling at the impact a single life can make in the world. And it's clear there that he set himself on the path to writing The Midnight Library. Notes like Midnight Library is filled with those sort of patently obvious truths that we all know and recognize. There's hardly anything new or revelatory here, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded again every once in a while. Go outside, put the phone down, know that you are enough. And yeah, reduced to a few words, it seems kind of basic, patently obvious, and, hardly revelatory. But if Jordan Peterson can make millions telling stunted Joe Rogan stands to pull up their socks and clean their rooms, well, I will not begrudge a kinder, gentler version that espouses going outside and reading more books. And frankly, if this is good enough for the patron saint of books herself, Dolly Parton, who recently tweeted she has 2 books on her bedside table, the Bible and the Midnight Library, who am I to argue? Maybe the book is even more important now. We're all still reeling from the forced hibernation of COVID-19, but many of us here in the West are slowly emerging from the dark, and a lot of us, frankly, are being real dicks about it. There's a great article in The Atlantic that talks to flight attendants who in the first 6 months of 2021 have recorded more unruly passengers than they have in any full year since they started recording the data. The number of cashiers being yelled at, servers being harassed, retail workers being denigrated is rising at an unprecedented rate. And the article argues that it is the consumer class or the dwindling middle class desperately trying to exert some sort of agency, faced with reality that they have so very little control over many aspects of their lives. They're turning to that promise that they've been told over and over again that as customers, they're king. And a lot of them are being real dicks about the whole thing. And I think this is just symptomatic of how fractured society has become. So reading a book that just talks about how to not be an asshole, maybe, and to stop living with regrets and keep moving forward isn't a bad thing after all. All right, so that's Matt Haig's Midnight Library. 4 out of 5 warm, fuzzy blankets, docking 1 blanket for subsequent cat death. Anyway, I did enjoy the read, like I said. So that's it for me this week. Hope you all have a great week of reading, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. All right, bye.